Pull a dollar bill out of your pocket right now. Look at it. Really look at it. It's a piece of paper, cotton and linen, technically. The raw material costs less than a cent to produce. And yet, people have killed for it. People have starved without it. Entire civilizations have collapsed when it lost its value overnight. Why? What is this thing, actually? Because what you're holding isn't money. Not really. It's a promise. And the story of how that promise got made is one of the strangest things that has ever happened in human history. Most people think they already know where money came from. The story goes like this. Before money, people bartered. A farmer traded wheat for shoes. A blacksmith traded iron for grain. But barter was clunky and inefficient. So eventually, someone clever invented coins. And everything got easier. It's a clean story. It makes sense. There's only one problem with it. It never happened. Not once in recorded history has any society been found that actually ran on barter the way economists described. Anthropologist David Graeber spent years searching for evidence of this barter economy. He found nothing. Not in ancient Mesopotamia, not in tribal Africa, not in the Americas, nowhere. The barter economy that every textbook starts with is a myth. A myth that economists invented to explain something they didn't fully understand. So, if money didn't replace barter, what did it replace? Or maybe the better question is, what came first? And here is where it gets genuinely strange, because the evidence points to something nobody expected. Debt came first. Not coins, not shells, not gold. Debt. The oldest financial records ever discovered aren't treasure hoards or trade receipts. They're clay tablets from ancient Mesopotamia, dating back to roughly 3000 BC. And what are they recording? Who owes what to whom? 1 measure of silver equals 60 measures of grain, to be repaid after the harvest. These weren't receipts from transactions that already happened, they were promises about transactions that hadn't happened yet. The credit system, the idea that you can owe someone something, came thousands of years before anyone ever minted a coin. That changes everything. Because if the first money wasn't a thing, it was an obligation, then money was never really about objects at all. It was always about relationships, about trust, about the invisible agreement between people that a promise has value. And that agreement, it turns out, has a much darker origin story than anyone taught you in school. Picture this. It's 3000 BC. You're a farmer outside the city of in ancient Mesopotamia. The harvest was bad this year. Your family is hungry. So you walk to the temple, not to pray, to borrow. The temple in ancient Mesopotamia wasn't just a religious building. It was a bank, a granary, an administrative center. It employed scribes, priests, and accountants. It tracked who owned what, who owed what, and who had paid what back. And when a bad harvest hit, farmers came to the temple the same way people today walk into a bank branch. They needed grain to survive the winter. The temple gave it to them. A scribe pressed a stylus into wet clay and recorded the debt. 1 measure of barley, due back after the next harvest, with interest. That clay tablet was then dried in the sun and stored. It was the world's first loan document. And there were thousands of them. This is what blew researchers away when they started systematically excavating Mesopotamian sites in the 19th and 20th centuries. They expected to find art, architecture, religious texts. What they found, in enormous quantities, was accounting, ledgers, receipts, debt records. The ancient Sumerians weren't just early farmers and builders, they were obsessive bookkeepers. They tracked obligations the way we track everything on our phones today. Because in a world without coins, without paper money, without any physical currency at all, what you were owed was the most important asset you had. But here's the part that really stops you cold. This system worked. For hundreds of years, across an entire region, people ran sophisticated economies entirely on credit. No coins changing hands, no gold bars in a vault, just clay tablets recording who owed barley to whom. The tablet was the money, the debt was the currency. And this wasn't primitive or unsophisticated. These were complex interest-bearing loans with repayment schedules, collateral, and penalties for default. The Code of Hammurabi, one of the oldest legal documents ever found, devotes enormous sections to debt law, interest rates, foreclosure, debt bondage, all of it codified, regulated, enforced. Societies built entirely around the accounting of obligation. And across the world, independently, other civilizations were doing the same thing. Different materials, different record systems, different temples or chiefs keeping the books, but the same core idea. Before money was something you could hold, it was something you were owed, a number, a relationship, a memory of what one person promised another. The physical object came later. What came first was trust, pressed into clay and baked hard in the sun. Here's the moment the story turns dark. Around 600 BC, in the kingdom of Lydia, in what is now Western Turkey, someone did something that had never been done before. They took a lump of electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver, stamped an image onto it, and declared it had a fixed value, the world's first coin. And for a long time, historians assumed the reason was obvious: trade, commerce, economic efficiency. The Lydians were a prosperous kingdom, well positioned between East and West, and coins made buying and selling easier. That's the story that ended up in textbooks. Then researchers started looking more carefully at where the earliest coins actually turned up. Not in marketplaces, not in merchant quarters or trading ports, in military camps, near barracks, at the sites of ancient armies. Historian David Shapps and later classicist Henry Kim spent years mapping early coin finds across the ancient world. The pattern was impossible to ignore. The earliest, most consistent use of coins wasn't commercial, it was military. Coins were invented, or at least perfected and mass-produced, to pay soldiers. Think about what that problem actually looked like. You're a king. You have an army of 10,000 men. They've been away from home for months. They need to eat, to drink, to buy equipment. You can't carry enough grain to pay them all. You can't barter individually with 10,000 people. You need something small, portable, standardized, and universally accepted. You need a coin. So you mint them, you hand them to your soldiers spend them with local merchants and farmers. And then you tax those same merchants and farmers, and the coins come back to you. The whole system is a loop designed not to create freedom or facilitate commerce, but to extract resources from a population and concentrate power in the hands of whoever controls the mint. That loop hasn't changed. Not fundamentally. Not in 2,600 years. Today, central banks create money. Governments pay armies, build infrastructure, fund bureaucracies. Citizens earn that money and pay it back as taxes. The mechanism is more complex, the technology is different, but the structure is identical to what a Lydian king figured out in 600 BC. Money, from the very beginning, was a technology of control, a way for the powerful to organize, mobilize, and extract. Every coin ever minted has carried that original purpose inside it, and almost nobody who uses money every day has any idea. So go back to that dollar bill. You're holding it again, and now you know what it actually is. It isn't backed by gold. The United States abandoned the gold standard in 1971 when Richard Nixon quietly severed the last link between the dollar and anything physical. Since that moment, the dollar has been backed by exactly one thing: the collective belief of billions of people that it's worth something. That's it. That's the whole foundation. Not metal, not land, not any tangible asset sitting in a vault somewhere. Just faith. Shared, simultaneous, planet-wide faith. And when that faith breaks, it breaks fast. In 1923, Germany was printing money so quickly that prices doubled every 4 days. Workers were paid twice a day so they could spend their wages before inflation ate them by afternoon. People burned banknotes for heat because the paper was worth more as fuel than as currency. In Zimbabwe in 2008, the government printed a $100 trillion bill. It wasn't enough to buy a loaf of bread. In Venezuela, just a few years ago, people were photographed carrying stacks of cash in wheelbarrows, not because they were rich, but because the notes had become so worthless that you needed enormous quantities of them to buy basic groceries. In every single case, the money didn't change. The paper was the same paper. The numbers were the same numbers. What changed was the belief. And when the belief went, everything went with it. This is what makes money the strangest invention in human history. Not the internet, not nuclear power, not artificial intelligence. Money. Because every other technology does something real. A wheel rolls, a circuit conducts electricity. Money does nothing on its own. It only works because everyone agrees it works. It is the most successful mass hallucination ever created, more universal than any religion, more durable than any government. Because unlike a religion, even your enemies accept it. Even people who hate each other, distrust each other, have been at war with each other, will still take each other's money. So the next time you pull out that dollar bill, really think about what you're holding. Not wealth, not security, not value. You're holding a promise that 7 billion people are keeping simultaneously, right now, without even thinking about it, including you. The moment you stop keeping it, it falls apart. The moment everyone stops, it's just paper again. It always was. The only thing that was ever real was the agreement. And somehow, for thousands of years, the agreement has held.